The ultimate fate of the Sun and other low-mass stars like it has been discussed before. After a series of expansions and contractions, these stars shed their outer layers and transform into white dwarfs, which then cool over billions of years. It might seem like the story ends there, but it doesn't quite. First, white dwarfs themselves are remarkably fascinating cosmic objects, worthy of close study. Second, the very moment a star becomes a white dwarf is marked by one of the most spectacular phenomena in the universe. In brief, as the Sun ages, profound changes occur in its core. Right now, it fuses hydrogen into helium. Eventually, it will begin fusing helium into carbon, while also producing oxygen and neon. However, once the helium is exhausted, the star runs into serious trouble. Its mass won't be sufficient to compress the carbon core enough to ignite carbon fusion. Nuclear fusion is the Sun's energy source, and when its core turns to carbon, that energy source vanishes. In about 8 billion years, the Sun's outer layers will be expelled due to the chaos unfolding in its core. All that will remain is its exposed core, floating silently in the darkness of space. Over the following billions of years, this core will gradually cool, eventually becoming a dark, inert object. This might seem like the end of the story, but one beautiful chapter was left out. When helium fusion ceases, the Sun's core will have roughly half its current mass, while the rest is ejected into space. What remains consists of electrons and carbon nuclei mixed with traces of other elements. So what kind of object is this? You may know that like charges repel. Electrons carry negative charge and push away from one another. The more they squeeze together, the stronger this repulsive pressure becomes. But there's another force at play: electron degeneracy pressure, arising from the strange rules of quantum mechanics, specifically what quantum physicists call the Pauli exclusion principle. This rule governs the behavior of subatomic particles at tiny scales. One consequence is that electrons resist being squeezed together far more intensely than simple electrostatic repulsion would suggest. This resistance is enormous and becomes the dominant force supporting the stellar core once helium fusion stops. When electron degeneracy pressure balances the core's immense gravity, the core shrinks to a size comparable to Earth, just 1% of the Sun's current diameter. At this point, the star is called a white dwarf. Merely describing the properties of such a star is enough to boggle the mind. Ironically, as its size shrinks, nearly all its other properties intensify. It becomes incredibly dense, a single cubic centimeter, about the size of a sugar cube, would weigh 1,000,000 grams, or 1 metric ton. A teaspoon of white dwarf material would outweigh 60 cars. Because it's so dense, surface gravity on a white dwarf is extreme, up to 100,000 times stronger than Earth's. A person weighing 75 kilograms on Earth would weigh 7,500 tons on a white dwarf. Of course, they wouldn't actually stand there. They'd be instantly crushed into a smear of organic matter. And only briefly, because newborn white dwarfs are extremely hot, radiating at temperatures up to 100,000 degrees Celsius. Anyone on the surface would instantly vaporize and become ionized. The name white dwarf comes from their small size and white color caused by their high temperature. They're so hot they emit ultraviolet and even X-rays. Paradoxically, their tiny size makes them faint. The closest one to us, Sirius B, lies just 9 light-years away and is among the 10 nearest known stars, yet it's visible only through a telescope. To date, over 10,000 white dwarfs have been discovered in our galaxy. Any gas near a newly formed white dwarf is bathed in its intense radiation. But wait! When a sun-like star reaches its final death throes, it ejects its outer layers as a stellar wind. What does that mean? Exactly. When the white dwarf forms, the expelled gas doesn't travel far. It drifts out to a distance of 1 or at most 2 light-years. That's close enough for the white dwarf's radiation to energize the gas, causing it to glow. And what does this look like? Like this. Such an object is called a planetary nebula. It's a curious name, one of many historical misnomers that stuck. The term was coined by astronomer William Herschel, who also discovered ultraviolet light and the planet Uranus. Through early telescopes, these objects resembled small green disks, much like planets, hence the name. The first planetary nebula was discovered in 1764 by French astronomer Charles Messier, who spent years scanning the skies for comets. He kept spotting faint, fuzzy objects he mistook for comets, and decided to compile a catalog of them, essentially a "don't waste your time on these" list. Today, this Messier catalog is a beloved guide for amateur astronomers, as it includes some of the brightest and most stunning deep sky objects. Among them is M27, the 72nd entry, also known as the Dumbbell Nebula, one of the largest and most admired planetary nebulae. It's a summer favorite for telescope observers. Spotting planetary nebulae in summer can be challenging, though. Most are small and faint. Even in long-exposure photographs, they often appear as indistinct smudges. For a long time, astronomers believed their structure was simple. As a star becomes a red giant and sheds its outer layers, its slow rotation leads to a spherical outflow of gas. Indeed, many nebulae, often just called nebulae for short, do appear spherical, like soap bubbles, matching expectations for an expanding gas shell. But with the advent of digital sensors, their true complexity has become clear, revealing astonishing beauty. Some are elongated, others spiral-shaped. Some blast twin jets of gas from opposite poles, and others display delicate filaments stretching into space. Of the hundreds known, only a few are truly spherical. Clearly, planetary nebulae possess features far beyond what the naked eye, or even early telescopes, could reveal. If stellar gas is ejected spherically, how do these diverse shapes arise? As is often the case in astronomy, reality is more complex. When a slowly rotating red giant emits a dense, slow stellar wind, and no other factors interfere, the wind expands equally in all directions, forming a sphere. But as the star sheds its outer layers, its hotter inner regions are exposed, and it begins emitting a faster, less dense wind. This faster wind catches up to the earlier, slower one, creating what's known as a bubble-shaped planetary nebula. However, some stars are binaries, two stars orbiting closely. Their interactions will be explored in a future episode. If a dying star has a companion, their mutual orbit can be very rapid. This orbital motion shapes the outflow, as the combined influence of the two stars channels most of the gas into the orbital plane. The result is a flattened structure, like a beach ball someone sat on. When the fast wind is later ejected, it slams into the denser material in the orbital plane and slows down. But near the poles, there's less material, so the wind expands more freely in those directions, forming two vast lobes stretching trillions of kilometers. This is a very common planetary nebula shape, but explaining the full variety of shapes we see requires the two stars to orbit extremely close together. Most binary stars aren't that close, so what else could be responsible?
During graduate school, the author's advisor, Noam Soker, proposed a bold idea. Perhaps these stars once had planets, like our solar system. If a star expands into a red giant and engulfs its planets, the planets could take millions of years or longer to fully evaporate. During that time, they continue orbiting inside the star, faster than the star itself rotates. Like a whisk stirring eggs, these planets would spin rapidly within the star, spinning it up enough to explain the complex nebula shapes. This idea emerged in the early 1990s. A few years later, the first exoplanets were discovered, and it became clear that massive planets orbiting very close to their stars are common. The author believes this is precisely why we see such strange and wondrous planetary nebula shapes. Their parent stars swallowed their planets. And so, planets may be the very reason planetary nebulae exist, closing a poetic cosmic loop. Planetary nebulae glow because the central white dwarf excites the surrounding gas. Most of this gas is hydrogen, which emits red light, but many also contain oxygen. Although oxygen is far less abundant than hydrogen, its emission is stronger due to the underlying atomic physics. This oxygen emits green light, the signature hue of many planetary nebulae. Here's a fun twist. When astronomers first analyzed this green light spectroscopically, they couldn't identify the element producing it and named it nebulium. Eventually, they realized it was just highly ionized, low-density oxygen. Nebulae also display other colors. Nitrogen and sulfur emit red, while oxygen can also produce blue. These hues add even more beauty to these celestial masterpieces. But they're more than just pretty pictures. A planetary nebula's structure, color, and shape tell the life story of the star that created it. By studying a star's death throes, we learn about its entire evolution. Moreover, the gas continues expanding, driven by the initial ejection, and gradually disperses until it no longer glows. This entire phase lasts only a few thousand years. So when you see a planetary nebula, you're witnessing an incredibly brief snapshot of a star's life and death. That's why such sights are rare. Though billions of stars in our galaxy end their lives this way, the planetary nebula phase is astonishingly short-lived. We should cherish their beauty while we can. This raises a natural question. What will happen to our sun?
Will it one day become the core of a glowing planetary nebula, like other dying stars? Most likely, no. When the Sun becomes a white dwarf, it won't be hot or energetic enough to make its ejected gas glow brightly. Most planetary nebulae come from stars significantly more massive and hotter than the Sun. Our star's final act will be quiet and unremarkable. Alien astronomers, if any exist 8 billion years from now, might not even notice.
More massive stars, however, depart in far more dramatic fashion. And if a star is over 8 times the Sun's mass, its death culminates in a colossal explosion. But that is a story for another time. So today we've learned that low-mass stars end their lives as white dwarfs, extremely hot, dense remnants about the size of Earth. These objects can illuminate the gas they once ejected, creating planetary nebulae, vast, intricate structures that last only a few thousand years. And while more massive stars light up the cosmos in their final moments, our Sun will likely fade away in silence, leaving no nebula behind. This program is a collaboration between PBS Digital Studios and Police Production Team. We highly encourage you to visit their channel and explore their outstanding content. This episode was written by Phil Plate, edited by Blake DiPastino, with scientific consulting by Dr. Michelle Fowler. It was directed by Nicholas Jenkins, edited by Nicole Sweeney, sound design by Michael Aranda, and animations by Thought Cafe.